Hi everyone, Jenny Blair. I am super excited to be here today because I've actually asked a special guest to join us. I've asked my husband, Jack Blair, to be a part of our From the Library of Jenny Blair episode today. The last couple of weeks I've been talking about styles of leadership or actual things I've done to try to enhance my team performance, make sure they feel supported. And so you've seen what I do and you've seen how I do it, but really we haven't answered the question of why I do it. And so I thought that's what we would focus on today's episode is why I'm doing this podcast or these social media spaces, and then kind of lean into some more of my philosophies on leadership. So Jack, thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me. I really enjoy it. Some of you may not know I work in the back a lot and I get things going, press buttons, record things. So if there's something wrong with an episode, it's usually my fault. You can blame me.
He was in the blooper reels. You saw a lightning tattoo flash by. So I thought it would actually also be interesting for us to chat because even though Jack and I work in different specters of life, I'm in education and he's in security, military, also audiovisual, media spaces. Jack has a lot of experience in leadership from a military perspective. And so I thought it would be really interesting to hear his insights as compared to mine. And I thought that might give us some deeper insights into really what we're talking about with human behavior and how we lead others and how we are led.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, you've got your perspectives from the civilian world and from business world. And I bring in a little bit of the crazy military life. And, I try to bring in what I consider like no nonsense leadership goals and behaviors. But, at a certain point, it's all about just pick it up and go, right?
And taking care of our people.
Take charge, take care of your people, because there's always going to be something wrong. So just keep trying to take care of your people and your people will take care of you.
Well, and I really like Jack, so I thought this would be fun. You guys get to see us in our natural habitat today, so.
That's awesome. Yeah, we're having fun. So what we're going to do is we're going to start off with just a little Q&A here. And so I'm just going to hit her up with some questions that I came up with ahead of time.
Are you going to answer them as well?
I can answer them as well, sure, absolutely.
And I haven't seen the questions ahead of time, so they're new to me as well, too. So it's like being in an interview. I haven't had a chance to prepare, so.
So we're starting off with, at what point in your career did you realize, hey, I'm a leader?
Wow, this is like the Hot Ones episode. Great question. So I think I realized there's obvious answers in terms of how you manage people or time cards or when people report out sick to you. So there's mechanical things that signal, hey, I'm a leader and you have organizational responsibility. But if you're asking me like a deeper question about what it means to be a leader and when I thought I was, I think it's whenever in my career, I've been leading for 12 years now, I think it's when you realize when you're in spaces with other people, other decision makers, other stakeholders, and that you have the power to make decisions or at least impact decisions that affect other people. And I think I realized I was a leader when I finally discovered that I have to advocate for the best interests of my team when they're not in the room, right? They're not there to talk about themselves or to advocate on their own behalf or to inform decisions that will potentially affect them. And so I think that's my thought, right? Is that I feel like I'm a leader when I finally recognize I'm in rooms that make decisions that affect others and I have to make decisions in their best interest. And that's how ultimately you gain trust too. How about you? Like, I know it's different in the military. It's also much more linear in terms of organizational structure, but do you have a feeling about what that feels like in the military when you feel like you're a leader?
So the military is really straightforward, right? Like they send you to Warrior Leadership Course, WLC, and they're like, hey, guess what? It's time to be a leader.
Right, you get certified and you were tested for it.
You get to a certain rank and they're like, hey guys, look at this. It's time to be a leader. So, when in the military, when you put on a certain rank, that's when it starts to become, hey, you're going to be a leader. So that's usually E4, depends on what branch you're in. So either E4 or E5. Yeah. So the next question we're going to look into is, what work experiences have impacted the way you lead?
So this feels a little bit like a stereotypical answer, but it's really the times I failed. It's the times where I really thought I could do something or quickly realized I was in over my head. A good example is about 6-7 years ago, I was head of a project for our core values. And the project itself ended up being amazing. We still use our core values to this day. I learned a lot about myself, but inside the moment, you learn a lot about yourself in the moments you fail. And I had failed to execute some of the strategy, and I hadn't been always as communicative as I should have been with some of our other project leads. And so I think those are the moments, right, where you're starting to realize, like, oh, I really have to get my stuff together. I think moments of failing really push you to have to look at something from a different perspective, whether you want to or not, because you have to figure out, I don't want to do that again. How can I do something differently? What did I contribute that got us to that point, right? And those are the moments where I feel really impacted by my leadership style. And then also too, just moments where when you hear feedback from people I've coached or mentored, and that really means a lot to me too, right? Because the whole point of being in leadership is that you're impacting people at a personal level. And so that's also really impactful to me when I hear feedback from folks who have been in my spaces and then left. So
I want to dig into that, benefit of being her husband. So I've been around her a while. ASU has something called Sun Awards. And I kind of feel like you must have won the most Sun Awards like in the world. And I kind of think that you must have done something in order for that to happen, right? Like a behavioral aspect. So I wanted to ask you, do you give a lot of Sun Awards?
thank you for asking. So not as often as I should now that you mention it, but I am the original hype person, and I do really believe in expressing gratitude, and something that I am really good at, and I try to be really intentional about. And I always joke with people on my team that if you're not good at receiving compliments, this is probably not the droid you're looking for. But I think it's really important to focus on things at work. We've talked a little bit about this in other episodes about appreciative inquiry, where you're focusing on things that are well in your organization. And so the concept of giving a Sun Award is where you acknowledge openly that someone has done something awesome, and you want to make sure that they recognize that. I usually take it a step further, and this is where you differentiate between recognition and appreciation. Recognition is the act of, hey, Jack, thank you so much for setting up our studio today so that we could chat. Appreciation is, thank you so much for setting up the studio so that we could chat. It really means so much to me that I'm able to talk about what's so important to me, what I'm so passionate about to the world. And so I usually try to take it that step further, where you let somebody know, yes, you were important because of this, and this is why it matters. So, but you're right, I could be better about giving Sun Awards, so for sure. And I also really quickly think it's important. Student workers are often doing some of the toughest work in a space, and so it's really important to make sure you're acknowledging them as well.
And that's the beauty of what the Sun Award is, right? It encourages people to do that recognition, which is one of the bloom points that you've talked about multiple times, is like, make sure you're giving your people recognition.
Yeah, for sure.
So, okay, well, that leads us into the next question, which is, what qualities do you value in a leader?
So things like open door, communicative, not a micromanager, those are important. And I understand why folks in a workplace will say that that's something they're looking for, because it also is about how they want to be managed or not managed in a workplace. But for me, the qualities that I'm really looking for, if we're being honest, just kindness. I talk a lot about that in my leadership style, and I'm hoping that that's something coming through our weekly time together, is that I think there's just not enough kindness in the world. And I always kind of joke about, when you're hiring for someone, if you're hiring for a skill set, or there's a lot of things I can teach. There's a lot of policy and processes and content that I can teach you, but I can't always teach people how to be kind. I can model kindness, because I think kindness is that epicenter where we get empathy and understanding and flexibility, and something I would call equity and not equality, right? So if I need something, if I need to leave early because something has happened with my kids and I have to pick them up from school, but maybe that's not somebody else's experience, like, is it okay if I leave at 4 instead of 5 because I need to go deal with this? And I think that all comes from a place of kindness. And so that's something that I appreciate when leaders show me, and then that's something I try to model with my staff as well. How about you? What is something that you value in a
Oh,
leader?
I'm not super original. I actually, the three
Oh
things that
no,
the three things that you
does well under
said,
constant supervision.
no, I don't want constant supervision. Let me push out, let me show you what success is, right? I love to solve problems. That is like what I'm programmed for, is finding a problem and then fixing it or solving it, right? I love new challenges, I love new things. And so, like a micromanaging boss, which I don't know if I've really ever had one, except for like one and off job experience in like a call center where everything was micromanaged to like the minute. But, in like professional work, I don't really come across that. And it's more of just like people who are, hey, are we getting what we need to get done? And so, for me as a worker, I just hit that and I go, over communicate, right? Make sure to be proactively
Right.
updating people and letting them know what's going on so that they don't feel like they need to check what's going on.
Well, and honestly, I don't remember where I read this, but when I was doing the core values project, there's actually a lot of scholarship and studies behind that mothers often make strong leaders, and they think that's because or the theory behind it posits that there's a kindness, a nurturing, and empathy that we may not always associate in traditional leadership spaces, especially in the private sector, but that there's a lot to be learned, right? From, how do you manage and coach your kiddo, right? Like if you're thinking about, let's say your kid fails a test or something, you're not going to boot them off the family, right? And so I think that there's actually, and even though you have to be careful about calling your work family that title, right? Because some families are very dysfunctional. But I think the concept, and that's probably a military concept about taking care of your own or investing in your tribe or whatever that space looks like, where you have to be willing to let people be human in spaces because that's probably going to happen no matter what.
Yeah. So the next question is a really easy tie-in from that, and it's basically just who's a leader that inspires you. So who's a leader that you've seen out there in the world, in the business, who inspires you?
So I think, am I allowed to name drop? I
You
can
can go
share.
big, you can go
Okay.
small, you can go,
So
everything.
I have the benefit, and as a female in the workplace, I'm surrounded by strong females. My bosses are women. And so I really believe, though, that that's impacted me over the last decade in terms of how I approach leadership, how I approach managing projects, managing people. Someone that's really inspirational to me, she actually just did a big presentation about her own leadership career. She's been at ASU 40 years. It's Luann Denny. She's the registrar of ASU and associate vice president. And I've worked with her, for her, both from afar and up close. And something that you witness firsthand is that she takes care of her people in public spaces and private spaces. The way that she presents herself publicly is the way that she is privately. And I think that that is so rare, and she also leads with kindness, right? There's one of our core values in our division is to lead with positive intent. And it's the idea that people are ultimately not trying to be nefarious or tricksters, that, really we're all just trying to do a good job, get our work done, help each other, and move about our day. And I feel like Luann is somebody who models that. Like she leans in with positive intent. She usually assumes the best in others, and I think that is really positive in how she makes decisions. So it's been really awesome to watch her be a leader, and I've learned a lot from her. So it's also about the way you hear others talk about her. So I've never heard anyone speak an unkind word. And when you're somebody who's been around at that high of a level for 40 years, I think that's incredible. And so I think that's a testament of how she always carries herself.
And I think you've already kind of touched on it, but our next question was, what do they do that sets them apart? So what does Luann Denny do that sets her apart from other leaders? And I think you kind of said it, but I'll just ask you to repeat it once more.
Well, and I'll use different language. So to me, there's a north compass, a north star, a moral compass, where the way that she acts in public is the way that she acts in private. And when someone has a set of core values that they've been able to articulate and live by and model, and you can see that in their behavior, I don't think you ever have to guess how she's going to make a decision. And so I think that that is really important in a leader, right? Where you model your core values and there's that set of principles that are pretty locked in stone. And so people typically then can predict how you're going to behave. And so I think that that's really important. Not to say that she's not adaptable and able to pivot and change. I just think that there's a really strong bedrock to her ethical spaces, and that she goes into the world with those ethical markers, and it's really hard to shake her from that.
Okay. So one of the things that we talked about when we talked about doing this conversation, right, was talking about what paying it forward means to you. And so I want to ask you, what does paying it forward mean to you?
Sure. So if we're being honest, so Jack came up with all the questions and I just saw them now, except this last one where you had asked me, is there anything particular I wanted to talk about? And I knew the concept of today was talking about my why. Why am I doing it? And so you had talked about then maybe leaning into some leadership questions. I wanted to pivot though to this concept of paying it forward, which is another reason I had you join me today, because our family went through a pretty catastrophic tragedy a decade ago, and in a lot of ways lost our setting and lost our own north compass, and how, you know, didn't understand how the world worked anymore. And having people rally behind us, and not just personally, right? And from the military community or from family or friends or church communities, but I got tons of support from my work community. And so I remembered back then when our family was working through this, you know, I was starting to keep a log of everyone that was helping us, because I am somebody who wants to make sure that I give credit where it's due and that I thank people and show appreciation and recognition. But when you go through something that catastrophic, that cataclysmic, you can't keep track of all that. There's just too much. And so I remember trying to settle on the concept of, well, someday when we have our bearings again, we'll pay it forward. And so that's what this whole space means for me, from the Library of Jenny Blair, is that people were so kind to us, so kind to you and to our family, and really kept us going when we didn't know what else was going to. And so this idea is that I'm so blessed that we came out on the other side of that, and that we're pretty scathed, right? And pretty scarred. And also, though, you and I think miraculously have been able to keep some level of positivity and happiness, which I think is amazing. And I can't believe that that's not just because everyone was so good to us and like, well, what can I do to pay you all back? I don't know, but I can be positive and I can try to share all the things I've learned in hopes that it might positively impact somebody else. Thank you for asking.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it was the planted question, right? But it's good because it brings up the topic, and we don't talk about it very often, but you know, we had a lot of family support, we had a lot of friend support, work support. The military gave me, you know, a lot of opportunities and a lot of patience, and you know, we are really thankful for that. And as we kind of move through life and move forward through life, I think, you know, we want to try to do something to give back.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Give back. Absolutely.
yeah, so I think, you know, I think it's good. And you know, helping with leadership I think is good because you're an inspiring female leader, and
Thank
you know, I
you.
don't want to put in the female aspect because you're just an inspiring leader, but
But it matters in spaces, and I identify as female, and I think about the ways that my femininity shows up in spaces and in leadership and how that can be a benefit. And I appreciate how you identify, right, as not feminine, and you bring your own energy. And it's kind of even going back to what I was talking about, that familial space of it, right, where there's dad energy and mom energy, right? And you see that in families sometimes. And so I just think that I appreciate that adjective, right? I do identify as a female leader, and I appreciate that. And I hope that that is a special space that I get to occupy that's impactful to people around me.
yeah. Well, the next thing that we've got after that, right, is going into our bloom points. So can you tell us what our bloom points are today?
Bloom points for the week. Sure. Okay. So if you've been following from the Library of Jenny Blair, again, we've been talking about what I do as a leader, how I do things as a leader. And today we've spent some time exploring why I do things as a leader. So that's something that I would invite you to think about this week as Bloom Point 1, which is to think about, why is it that you do what you do? And that can be actually kind of a hard concept to unpack. So if you're not sure how to do that, just stop and think about quickly your life story, things that really inspired you as a small kiddo, things that were exciting to you in high school or college. And as you think about highlight moments in your life, as you kind of quickly run through your life reel, you'll find that things often emerge and pop up. And we actually did this for you. I did it. So, you know, when I think about my childhood bright spots, I have a memory of graduating kindergarten, and I have a memory of being valedictorian of 8th grade and giving the speech at my high school and winning scholarships. So when I think about all these really cool, special things that happened to me, being able to graduate, it's usually circulating around education. And I feel like you did a similar concept, but yours focused on travel and helping people.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm really motivated to see the world, right? And see new places and try to understand things that are totally outside of my frame of scope, right? So I've been to several continents. Asia,
From a young age, like high
even
school.
young. Yeah,
Yeah.
as a young kid, I was traveling. Went out with different church groups and went to different places. Traveled internationally before I was 18, and just got the bug for seeing the world and for seeing reality. Right, like when you stay at home in one place, it's very easy to see the world through your television and through the internet. And those are just those people over there with those problems. And when you go out and you go see those places and those people, they're just people. And they're all just trying to do what's best for them. And, it's really, really interesting because it helps you see different cultures and different understandings, but we're all just human.
And not just traveling as a tourist. I feel like when we did this exercise about finding bright spots in your childhood and then, youth and young adult, it's about the space of helping people. It's traveling and then also supporting others, which makes sense then that you would join the military and then do efforts like Team Rubicon overseas. And so that makes sense, right? When we talk about finding your why, right? Things that inspire you and then what causes you to take action.
Yeah, and kind of what I talked about earlier with just like how I like to solve problems. I'm also have a little bit of a hero complex. And so like, if I can go out and save somebody or rescue someone or do
Especially
something,
if you're overseas and need help. He's there. He's your guy.
you know, just come knocking, I'll come. I
Absolutely.
enjoy travel. I got a backpack, I'm ready to
He
go.
does, and a passport, a go bag.
Passport, good to
But
go.
but so try that, right? So again, so just do a quick review of your life, right? It doesn't have to be a long thing, and even just kind of map it out too. Sometimes it's fun to doodle or draw, and draw things, highlights in your life, and then see what your through thread is, and that's oftentimes a way to identify what your why is.
Okay, so that's your first bloom point, right? Is identify what your why is.
Mm-hmm.
What else would we do?
So this is something actually really interesting. So again, as a librarian or an English major, the idea of journaling becomes very important. This is something I was thinking about as you were asking me the leadership questions, is that ask yourself some of those questions and then write them down. And that can be really powerful too. And even if you are not sure what to do with that information now, this is what inspires me, or this is what I look for in a leader, or this is when I recognized I was a leader. Even if you don't do anything with it now, write it down, save it, and then look at it in 2 weeks, 2 years, a month, whatever that is. And sometimes that can be helpful too, to get a sense of who you are now. And that can also give you some insights into your leadership style going forward. That's Bloom Point 2, is journal about what it means to be a leader.
And if I can be really cheeky
Yeah.
and add something to that.
Yeah.
So journaling is super cool, right? But I'm all into tech, right? I'm all into all the electronics. So in iOS, whatever, they added the journal app. And it's
Okay.
actually really cool.
Yeah.
And I encourage you, if you're an Apple user, go ahead and check it out. It's got some really cool options with it. And one of the things that like what it does is it prompts you, says, hey, here's some pictures that you took. Why don't you write about this experience? We can tell you went outside your normal GPS bubble. You should probably write something down so you don't forget what happened in this moment, right?
Especially if you didn't post on Instagram. So make sure you get it recorded
And if
somewhere.
you've got, all the TBIs and all the brain injuries and you forget stuff, jot that stuff down. So, I mean, I think, yeah, I'm mentioning Apple's version of Journal, the app, but there's also other ones that are really good. And the main thing is just double tapping that point, right? Write down your thoughts, write down those things as they come to you, because, you don't want to lose them.
It's really important to express them. So for Bloom Point 3, this is something that shouldn't come as a surprise. Ask someone else those questions. Ask a colleague, a coworker, someone on your team, what do you think makes an inspiring leader? And what are things that you're looking for in leadership? And again, thinking back to some of our other episodes, when you ask the question, don't be surprised at the answers you get. And then you might get something that you can use with your own team. And so I think that can be really helpful. It's really important, this concept of appreciative inquiry, when you ask people questions about themselves. People really like to talk about themselves, and they really like when you ask. And so I would ask these same questions of yourself and then also of your team members.
And we'll go ahead and put those questions down in the description so that you can ask them below.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you for joining us. I'll have you back. You are a great guest. Thanks,
Well, it's been
everyone.
fun.
Thank you. Have a great week, everyone. I'll see you later. Bye.